welcome back to another episode of the Scions of the Southland recap show. It is September 27th here on a beautiful day in Atlanta. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Jake Grant from the campus of Georgia Tech. How are you, sir?
Well, you see, it's a beautiful day to be a Chicago Bears fan. The Bears, the Cubs, the White Sox,
Oh, God.
they're all in first place. No, I hate that I have to take such pride in the football antics of today, but after yesterday, I'll raise my flag even if it means other people's get burnt, torn, salted, and stepped on.
There's quite a few people that might need that treatment after the events of today.
We'll leave that to the alcoholics at the Falcoholic. So,
yeah, that's more their department. But we do have another Georgia Tech football game to talk about, as well as a lot of other ACC games to talk about. But we did have some Georgia Tech volleyball earlier this week. Jake, I hear you have an update on that.
I do. And before I start, I want to shout out Trevor Davidson, who's doing our advanced stats for From the Rumble Seat now for them, doing a fine job. So look for the advanced look later. But the short, I guess, 3-sentence snippet is, went to Miami for 2 games, split them 1-1, went to the 5th set in each. Your context is Miami last year was not that good, but they were riddled by injuries. And in the past, Tech has gone through, blatant cupcakes for a while before hitting conference play, and has a history of starting out slow. So it was definitely, I'm not going to say unsurprising to see them lose the first game, but they definitely looked slow out of the gate. But that's kind of been typical for them over the last few years. But they did hold on, gut it out, make their adjustments to a young Miami team and a healthy Miami team this year. And get the win on Friday.
Yeah, and I caught parts of both matches, and there was one Miami player that was very, very tall, and she was really making the most of her stature right when she was on the net. Like lots of blocks.
Elizabeth, I forget her last name, but I remember her first name was Elizaveta. Yes. She's a red.
I didn't look up the roster. I feel like she's number 8 on Miami or something. But she was able to, keep Tech's front line in check for a lot of that match. Actually, yeah. For a lot of both matches. And I do think to start the season splitting that series. Obviously, there are only 8 games because of the adjustments to the schedule because of COVID. But to start the season splitting that series is a little disappointing, especially when your opponent is coming off of the season that Miami had last year.
Yeah, but again, you have the carve outs of they haven't seen live play since December, even if they were one of the last teams in the country to be playing. I think the fact that they made adjustments, because Miami basically had film on all these players, right? Because it's essentially the same lineup we trotted out and swept them twice last year with. And a lot of what Tech was seeing was a bunch of question marks from somebody who hasn't played in 2 years or who has never played college ball, or certainly not seeing them play together. So, yeah, I didn't foresee us losing either game. I thought it wouldn't also be particularly close. So I'll eat some words on that. But in hindsight, it's a loss that in a normal year would be very recoverable. The problem is the schedule this year looks a lot more like football than basketball, because it's usually like a 30-plus game set, and we see it as like, oh yeah, basketball is going to drop one to NC State or whoever.
Grambling State, what?
And yeah,
State, what?
Women's basketball is going to drop one to not that team.
Okay,
but
I get your point.
Yeah, Every loss just means more, Akshay. It's all
We're
quality
SEC
losses.
now.
Mm-hmm. All quality losses. But no, Tech still has a shot. NCAA announced that the tournament's going to be in the spring, only with 48 teams, so harder to get in. But I mean, I assume we'll play more games after Jan 1, so that'll help too.
Yeah. Who are they playing next?
So pods are 3 pods of 5 teams. You play the other 4 teams in double headers.
Right.
So the other 4 teams are in action this week, and then we'll see Florida State at home the 7th, I think, is our next game. It's either 6-7 or 7-8.
Okay. That's next week, I think.
Yeah.
Well, like the week after this, you know what I mean. Yeah, Florida State, I think we talked about them very high level a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. They were a good team last year, right?
Yeah. Right. Bubble quality ACC team. They're probably the second best team in our pod after us. Granted,
Famous last words.
that's a bold statement to
That is
say,
a very bold statement.
considering we just split 1-1 with Miami. But again, Miami has been a tournament team 8 of the last 11 years. So again, it's not like we're playing
The Citadel? What?
it's not like we're going up the street and playing Grady or something like that. So we should go 2-0 against Clemson. We should go 2-0 against Wake. Florida State is the other one that I was like, okay, like if we go 1-1, I'll understand. But it's at home. I hear they're letting fans in, so and we know how Tech plays at O'Keefe. So
it'll be interesting to see what they do, depending on the fan situation. Obviously, that's always going to be in flux the rest of the way here, depending on what the situation is on campus. But a rowdy O'Keefe is always, a couple ticks to the win probability there.
yeah, I will say that O'Keefe is definitely a two-headed beast. You hit that like magic whatever, like 60-ish% full, and it goes from like, okay, this is weirdly empty to being like ravenous. So hopefully the people who show up, because there's no chance it'll be at 60%, are ravenous. But I don't know, like in terms of just holding matches with people at them, Georgia Tech's numbers, COVID wise, look fantastic. I believe we're under 10 positive cases from all of last week in asymptomatic testing. So the whoever powers that be that you want to paint this on, that want to make it look like Georgia Tech is doing bad, they're wrong. I couldn't be more pleased with how Georgia Tech has been handling the coronavirus.
That's good to hear. And, hopefully volleyball does get its fan support in a safe environment the rest of the way.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's move on to talk about the other ACC games that were in action this weekend. I got the schedule pulled up. I'm just going to rattle them off and tell me what you think here.
Go right ahead.
All right, the one of the nooners, other than our game and Syracuse, number 24 Louisville 20, number 21 Pittsburgh 23. That was on the ACC network.
Again, because I was watching our game at noon pretty exclusively, I didn't see more than a couple seconds of this game, but I think it validates, just looking at some of the stats and the score, some of my preconceptions of both teams. I'm personally pleased to see it was a tight contest. I think that validates their ranks. Granted, we're going to see that shuffling around with, everybody else trying to get their 7 and 8 game schedules in, but I think the better team won, and gosh, Louisville makes me less confident in them being scary as I was, but also Syracuse made me way less confident in us than I was, so I can't really take away anything.
It's all a wash.
It's just L's all the way down.
I will note that Louisville, two notes on Louisville. One, Louisville dropped out of the polls today after being at 24. Pittsburgh dropped to 24 in the AP poll. So that's a note on Pittsburgh. But the major story coming out of this game is that I think on literally the last offensive snap for Louisville, their starting quarterback, Mikhail Cunningham, had to be carted off. So obviously, hope he's okay. I did not look ahead at Louisville's schedule to see if they're playing this coming weekend. But hopefully, he's healthy by the time that Tech and Louisville meet up in 2 weeks.
Yeah. For the first time, we're playing a football game in which my family is a house divided. So we'll see how that one goes.
That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
The other nooner was going to be number 7 Notre Dame at Wake Forest. That was going to be on ABC, but that got canceled because of coronavirus tests, I believe, at Notre Dame. So we'll see what the situation is moving forward for both schools. But moving on to the 4 p.m. slot on ACC Network, Duke 20, Virginia 38.
Yeah, I'm glad of those two teams. Duke's the one still on our schedule. Every year I feel like they're going to start being Duke again. Which, for the record, I have never seen them be Duke in quite the way some of our fan base thinks of Duke. While I've been a Georgia Tech fan, but if that's the year they're going to do it, well, cool, sign me up.
Yeah, I think I know this is a small sample size, but it seems like Virginia has somewhat stabilized after the loss of Bryce Perkins and a lot of their contributors from last year. But
Yeah.
again, I think that comes with the caveat of Duke. So
Yeah, we got to see him play a couple more games first. Commonwealth Cup has got pushed around a lot, and they, small sample size, and Duke.
speaking of small sample sizes, the 6 p.m. game I think this was on your regional sports network.
Oh yeah,
Boston College 24, Texas State 21. I just want to go on the record and say Texas State had this game in the bag until they got what was it? Either a roughing the punter or a targeting penalty on 2 consecutive punts by Boston College, and just gave Boston College 2 prime field position drives to win this game.
Yeah, I'm very pleased that Boston College won, because if they hadn't, I would have had told you were right, and I hate doing that.
So close. Texas State has lost 3 games now in very, very brutal ways. I think there was a 7-point loss to SMU to start the year. They missed an extra point and a field goal in overtime 2 weeks ago. I think that was to Louisiana Lafayette or Louisiana Monroe. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then this game at the buzzer at Boston College. Very, very, very good 1-3 team. Arguably the best 1-3 team in America.
Gosh, those are
That's what Split Zone Duo. That's what a Split Zone Duo said this morning.
What is a split zone duo, sir?
It is Moon Crew's new podcast. Also, it's some sort of running play that I don't really understand. And I think that's the whole point. So you can't see it, but I'm shrugging my shoulders in confusion.
My question is, when is Godfrey going to grace us with his presence again? But I guess that's not for me to know.
Yeah, that's for us to find out. We're also wondering when Florida State will show up ever again. Good segue. I had to think about that one for a second. Florida State 10, number 12 Miami 52. That was the 7:30 on ABC.
So, is Miami back, or is Florida State just so bad that they lost in a butt kicking by their rival and to Georgia Tech?
I think Florida State is just really bad. I love small sample sizes here. I don't think that's a thing, but I'm going to claim it's a thing. Also, Florida State is very bad at football. And I don't have to eat crow for saying that because we beat them. So
yeah, that's fair.
Florida State is very bad at playing football. This game was 38-3 at halftime. I feel very bad for you. You're a Florida State fan. I have sympathy because I watched this happen to Georgia Tech last year, but ooh, this is a rough one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final game on the ACC slate was the 8 p.m. slot on the ACC network. That was NC State 24, number 20, Virginia Tech 45.
This is remarkably similar looking to that one horrible, horrible basketball game that you played.
Ooh, there was a joke made about that on Twitter, I think from Roger Sherman.
Really? Great minds,
Yes.
man. Great minds.
Yeah, I don't remember the score from the basketball game. I think it was like 48, 47, 24. But yeah, I mean, it's technically a basketball score. We saw some other like actual basketball scores this week. Texas Tech comes to mind, but this is also technically one.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about Texas, I was going to say minor programs, but Texas Tech isn't really a minor program. If you want to talk about Texas, insert other word describing a school thing here, state, tech, whatever, that could have had a nice little upset for themselves. The Red Raiders, that was
Oh,
a game I watched a lot of, I'll tell you that.
that was brutal. That was to have that game end like that, and also blow a 14-point lead, no, 15-point lead in 3 minutes. You know, I guess I've seen that twice in the last 2 weeks, so I sympathize.
Go Bears. Indeed.
All right, so that about does it for the ACC slate. Shall we get to our main point of business today?
Would that be the football game played in the new and improved Carrier Dome?
The new and improved and refurbished Carrier Dome. Was it Ernie Davis Legends Field?
Yeah, legends of the field.
Indeed. So Georgia Tech went up to Syracuse in New York this weekend and came home with a 17-point loss, 20-37. I kind of referred to this earlier, but I do need to eat some crow from last week. I called Syracuse point blank a very bad football team. Um, I don't think I can say that in good faith anymore. Um, this was, I mean, their offense needed some work, and we'll talk about that. But that defense held up very well. Held up is not really the word, but they played very well against a pretty youthful, pretty inexperienced Tech front. And obviously head to head score wise, Q's proved they were better. So
Yeah,
I will take my lumps there.
the whole pattern of getting into a hole, getting it back to be close, sort of late, and then the other team just pulling away. Shades of UCF. I would not call Syracuse as good of a team as the Golden Citronauts or whatever they're called.
Oh,
But
that's gonna make UCF Twitter angry.
I mean, if a bunch of dudes want to come after me, they can find me at I don't
38 Godfrey
know,
on
Joey,
Twitter.
Magna Carta Live, Akay Schwaron. All of these are Twitter accounts that will eventually get back to me.
Obviously. I mean, if it means more listeners, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, you gotta be edgy, I guess. But no, um, I what's the difference between Syracuse and UCF that Florida State didn't have? Tape. Florida
Yeah.
Florida State didn't have the advantage of knowing what a Jeff Sims, and UCF didn't have the advantage of knowing what a Jameer Gibbs what would look like, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have a more mediocre team, definitely, than UCF, with plenty of time to say, here's how you can attack the true freshman on the offensive line, right? Here's how you
Mm-hmm.
can attack the true freshman at starting quarterback, and even the running backs, which is our most stable position, right? Like nobody is immune to being young.
I mean, I feel like most people in the world don't want to be immune to being young. I feel like being young is a good thing, but it certainly did not work out for Tech in this game. Sims made a lot of freshman mistakes to the point where Collins pulled him right late in the fourth quarter with 3 drives, I think, remaining for Tech. Um, he went 13 for 28 for 174 yards, which is like pretty down from where he was the last 2 weeks. He had 1 touchdown, but he threw 4 picks, the latter 2 of which were ooh, very, very bad.
Hey, Roddy thinks he's going to win a Heisman, though, so just get ready for that in 3 years.
To clarify, that is Roddy White of Falcons glory, not Roddy Jones. Roddy had to have had something to drink watching that, but because it was not a good performance under center, or I guess at the shotgun position. Anyway, it so 4 picks, and then also you tack on a fumble there. It just was not a good it just was not a good performance, and I think part of it isn't really on him. It's like you said, Cuse was able to bring a lot of pressure against a relatively inexperienced offensive line. Obviously, you have transfer Ryan Johnson in there, you have Mikey Minahan in there who got a lot of snaps last season, but by and large, that offensive line is still relatively new. It's still coming together, and it's still young overall, and they just had a lot of trouble keeping the pocket clean for Sims. When he got rid of the ball quickly, he was clicking at times, but when he had to sit in the pocket, sort of find a read, you saw weird stuff happen. Like we had the pass batted into the air for a pick. We had just some like weird running around in the pocket and then getting sacked. Like it could have gone a lot better for the offensive line in this game.
Yeah. Again, I don't have a ton to add. I don't want to harp on them too bad. I do think the play looks better than it did, and like to their credit, they were getting 5, 6, 7, 8 Syracuse guys right in their faces on almost every play. Like at some point, that not like even if it's not in a specific play that they beat you, it wears you down. It wears you down. And to Jeff Sims and Dave Patton's credit too, there's a couple plays where they were able to look down the field and throw a pass, albeit not always a very good one, but at least something.
And I think it was this is something that we touched on after the UCF game too. If teams are going to load the box and then play man coverage against you, you have to beat them over the top. Like they're daring you to beat them over the top, and you saw it a couple times in this game. There was the one almost touchdown reception from, I want to say it was Amarian Brown down the sideline. That was just a deep bomb. But it was, you sort of kept seeing Georgia Tech's adherence to those short and medium throws rather than trying to continue to hit a Syracuse secondary that was already missing its best player, and also usually just playing man to man.
Yeah, I agree. And you'd think we'd get lucky on them missing a pretty big part of their secondary, but what was I going to say? One thing that I would like to add before we get off of offense or pivot away, speaking of going over the top and getting in the passing game, we did such a great job against Florida State getting the ball through the air to our running backs. And I think we completed, one pass to a running back?
I can look that up real quick. Just keep talking. I'm looking it up.
I think Jemias Griffin had one, but I cannot for the life of me remember. I don't shame on me. I don't keep the stats immediately in front of me. I kind of vamp off of this. Love being the gut feel guy. But yeah, no, I thought we did a really great job against Florida State spreading the wealth, and I just haven't seen that as much. Also, while I'm on this, running backs in general, clearly that is the high point of, I think, any of our units is our running back room, and whether you're getting them more involved by pounding the rock or going through the air, then I think that Tashard's light needs to shine a little brighter there.
Mm-hmm. Just to sort of put a bow on this, Jahmyr Gibbs had the only 2 receptions for a Georgia Tech running back, and he went 2 for 26, with really one of those being the touchdown on 4th down, which was like 24-yard reception, and then the other being a 2-yard reception. So, yeah, I think that's something we didn't see, but like you're saying, it's something that we definitely saw versus UCF too, and it's something that Richard Johnson from Moon Crew and formerly SB Nation pointed out on Twitter in the aftermath of that game, that Tech ran some really nice HB angle routes and HB wheel routes in that game versus UCF to sort of take advantage of the advantages of the seams in UCF's coverage, and that's not something that we really saw in this game. So hopefully that's something that we see more of as the season progresses, because if you looked at sort of the cut-ups that Richard was doing, that was something that was super effective, because especially when the defense is bringing a lot of pressure, that leaves that midsection pretty wide open. So if you can get a running back into that space, he's home free for a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I think if we see pressure, we need to be dialing that back up. I think the last thing on our show notes from the offense is talking about the procedural penalties, which were awful. Like, I know Jeff got a little bit, not Jeff Sims or Jeff Collins, but Jeff Kramer, our football editor, got a little bit roasted in his recap for talking about specific players and specific penalties. Man, you got to call a spade a spade. If it keeps happening, 15-104 is not an accident. It's not an accident.
And to clarify, that's 15 total penalties for 104 yards. Obviously, we haven't split that into, defensive penalties and offensive penalties, but even like anecdotally, the vast majority of those calls are false starts or false starts, illegal procedure, illegal shift, illegal formation. There may have been a couple holdings in there. It just was like obviously this team is young, and that was a caveat that one of our other writers brought up, is that yes, this team is young, yes, we expect them to be undisciplined, but 15 penalties for that kind of undiscipline is a lot.
Yep.
And especially when for by and large you outperformed Syracuse. Obviously we're talking like very negative about the offense, but if you look purely statistically, this was they outgained Syracuse like by a significant margin. Especially when you get this many penalties, that's just going to kill drives. It's going to kill momentum, and it just gives Syracuse opportunities to score on short fields when you have to punt from like ridiculously deep in your own territory. Like there was one instance where Tech was facing a 1st and 35.
Yep.
That kind of stuff is just not. It needs to be worked on.
When you make a 25-yard gain and run past a stick and it's not a first down, bad sign. And I will say one other thing is that I'm trying to word this. I'm not trying to inflame or anything like that. Oh, yes, it was put to me well. Procedural penalties and being undisciplined. Turning the ball over a lot. And, going hit or miss through the air. You can have one of those things, or even 2 of those things sometimes.
Can't have all 3.
Yeah. You can't have systematic failings, bad clock management and coaching. You can't have a chain reaction, because the effect is exponential, right? Your one thing leads into another, and then they all work together, and suddenly you're in 4 holes instead of, there's 4 holes nearby each other. Like, that's not how it works. You're staring down a deep well at that point.
I think we've battered a young offense just enough. Let's move on to the defense, which is, notably a little bit more experienced. Tommy DeVito, who's Syracuse's quarterback, had, a so-so day under center, but I mean, he's still able to do pretty well. I think the advanced metrics and some of the efficiency stats don't necessarily agree with me, but if you look at it purely in terms of volume, 13 for 24 for 194, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Like, it's not a terrible day at the office.
No, he was okay. He was okay.
He was serviceable.
Our defense lacked a little bit of the havoc or the bringing it to the quarterback that I think we've had the first couple weeks, but I don't know. Picking him off felt like a huge momentum shift when that happened, and I think our defense did a decent job containing him.
Mm-hmm. I will also mention that Cuse was able to hammer the run game pretty good, but surprisingly less than I thought they did. Turner, who was their main running back, who I believe is a freshman, went 24 for 112 and a touchdown. But he was able to rip over some big runs in open field, where there were just a couple missed tackles here and there from tech linebackers.
Yeah, I think he's a talented player. I'm not gonna besmirch him.
Mm-hmm. It's also important to note that Cuse is a team that lost its two starting running backs to opt-outs before the season. So Turner is the third choice guy, and he still did pretty well against Tech. On the back end, or I guess the front end here, Tech's havoc rate, like you touched on, was pretty not so good. They only had the one sack on Tommy DeVito, who's had been sacked, I think, 15 times in the previous 2 games, and that had around an 12% havoc rate. But I think again, sort of rigmarole here is the defense overall. If you look at all the overall things, it didn't do terribly, and Cuse wasn't super effective on offense either. Like, just to read off a couple stats here, Cuse's overall success rate on offense was 32%. Passing the ball, 36%. Running the ball, 30%. Like, these are low. These are far below national averages. So, like, efficiency-wise and effectiveness-wise, they did well. But they were also working with short fields the vast majority of the time because of mistakes by the offense.
Yeah. The short fields, like especially out of the gate, forcing it wasn't a 3-and-1 off the start, but they immediately got a first down and then it was 3 and out. And another long drive. Defense contained them great, but those short fields, you build up an early lead and then you're playing a different style of ball than when it's 0-0.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that you touched on the offensive side of the ball, but I think applies for the defensive side of the ball too. Opposing offenses have also realized what Tech's tendencies are, is because they have that tape of how this defense has looked. And I think that tape from UCF that showed that tempo and throwing over the top is very effective against this defense had a big impact on UCF or on Syracuse's game plan this week, because that's what you saw. They went to tempo a lot, especially early. The first couple drives were high tempo. And then you saw every drive at least once DeVito was going long. And I think that like an adjustment needs to be made there to make sure that is sorted out moving forward this season.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, rounding out our game recap, special teams was special in multiple ways. Gavin Stewart's first field goal attempt on Saturday was not great. That bounced off of a lineman's helmet and ended up wide right, if I remember. I think that was from 26 as well. So not
a particularly long one.
Yeah. I will note 2 good things. We had some decent kickoff and punt returns from Ezard and Gibbs. So those were nice to see. And then also, Presley Harvin is still booming punts.
Yeah.
Can't complain about that.
The Presley Harvin punt got us a lot of Twitter traction. Thank you for the people who give us clout. We appreciate you.
Punters are people too, Jake. Punters are people too.
I mean, he's our unit. Can't hate on that.
Yeah, it is important to note that one of Harvin's punts was almost 70 yards, right? I think air yards it was 70, but since punts are for some reason ruled from the line of scrimmage, it ended up being 64.
Yeah, he was pretty far back in his own territory and put it that, and it was immediately after a procedure penalty that bumped us back. Because I remember I was like, shoot, like that was a pretty good punt, blah blah whatever, and then he goes and booms it 10 yards longer, puts it on the 4-yard line.
Oh yeah, no. I remember the punt. It bounced right at the 5, but then but its bounce was horizontal, like completely horizontal, and bounced out of bounds.
Yep.
It was amazingly skillful, and I think I enjoy every time he punts the ball. That's not something I expect to say about a football team, but I genuinely enjoy every time Presley Harvin punts a football.
You can take this quote to the bank, Akshay. Presley Harvin's punts are must-watch TV.
They are. They are. Punters are people too.
Yep.
And last couple of notes here, advanced stats wise, Tech's 5 turnovers resulted in or equated to about 10.6 points of turnover luck based on Bill Conley's formula. So you can just kind of think of that as leaving 10.5 points on the table. Not particularly great. And going back to what I've been sort of harping on this whole episode, Tech's win probability in this game based on our model was about 53%. So this was a winnable game.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the stats, it's just penalties and mistakes just continued to bite Tech in the Tech in the neck or the back or whatever the other word is that I'm trying to avoid saying. Any final thoughts?
You started quoting a famous song there, actually, but I'll leave that to our listeners.
Yeah, I realized that as soon as those words came out of my mouth, and now I regret saying that live on air. But we're gonna swerve right past that.
You gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet. Otherwise, I need this bye week. This team's put me on an emotional roller coaster. That team put me on an emotional roller coaster. Next Saturday, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm sure as heck not watching any football.
Can watch the Falcons on Monday. That'll be an emotional roller coaster.
The one good thing about the Falcons is that I can watch them purely for entertainment, and it doesn't let me down because I just don't care.
Speak for yourself. All right. Just to finish this off, new S&P Plus rankings were out this morning. They are now out of 126 teams, with the Big Ten, Pac-12, Mountain West, and Mid-American opting back into the season. There are 4 other teams in FBS that are not playing. I don't really know what those are offhand. Anyway, Tech is now 63rd in SP Plus with the 94th ranked offense, 40th ranked defense, and 69th ranked special teams.
Nice.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this game before we do our picks for next week?
Let's talk picks. I'm ready to be done with Syracuse.
Okay, let's go over to picks. So we are looking.
Can I tell the listeners how we did last week?
Go for it.
Perfect. Yours truly got 4. Akshay got 2. Notre Dame and Wake both lost to COVID, so it was only out of 5 games.
Team chaos there.
I both picked Louisville, who lost, Virginia and Miami, who won, and then the difference was We had Boston College and Texas State. I picked BC.
I should get half of a point for
State.
that.
And the other one, I picked Virginia Tech, and you picked North Carolina State.
Okay. Well, I still think the Hokies are questionable, especially since they had 26 players out versus North Carolina State. But that says a lot about North Carolina State as a football program currently.
It really does, doesn't it?
All right. Starting on a Friday, October 2nd, 7 o'clock on the ACC Network, Campbell at Wake Forest.
Sir, if you don't pick Wake Forest, I might have to just yeet out of the podcast right here. Wake Forest is going to win.
Wake Forest is going to win big. I don't have the line in front of me, but if Wake Forest doesn't cover whatever line, that is concerning.
Georgia Southern beat Campbell with half their team out.
I think they may have failed to cover, but I don't have that number in front of me immediately. All right, moving on to Saturday.
Got to win.
Moving on to Saturday, the nooner on the ACC Network, NC State versus newly minted number 24 Pittsburgh.
I'll take Pitt.
I think Pitt might skunk NC State here. I think there's a real possibility of it.
More or less than their skunking of Austin Peay at home?
I mean, like a higher or lower probability? I mean, definitely a lower probability.
But the score, what do you think it's going to be?
I don't know. I still don't believe in that Pitt offense. Like, I feel like it's going to be like 24 points. 24 points sounds reasonable.
Okay, I'll take it.
All right. The 3:30 on ABC, number 12 UNC at Boston College.
Do you believe in Boston College yet?
Do I want to see UNC lose? Yes. Do I believe that Boston College is going to be the team to do it? Yeah, why not? I'll take Boston College.
All right. To be an antagonist, I'll pick UNC.
As is tradition. Moving on, the 4 p.m. slot on your local regional sports network. Jacksonville State at Florida State.
Bro, give me the Gamecocks.
I kind of want to pick Jacksonville State here, but, if Florida State doesn't win this game, I don't think there's another win on their schedule. I really don't.
All right. So are you Florida
I'm going to pick
then?
Florida State to clarify. Florida State has to win this game.
They have to, but will they? I don't know.
Well, I'm picking them, so hopefully. The other 4 p.m. game in ACC land, this is going to be on the ACC Network. Virginia Tech travels to Duke.
Give me Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I will also take the Hokies. Duke is not so great right now.
Agreed.
And then the nightcap, 8 p.m. on ACC Network. Virginia travels to Clemson, South Carolina.
Yeah. If you don't pick Clemson, I would be very shocked. I'm going to go with Clemson. I saw what happened the last time these two teams played. It'll probably happen again.
Yeah, this one's a no-brainer. But if we were picking based on the spread, I might be convinced to take Virginia. But we're picking straight up. So give me Clemson.
Perfect.
I'm fine with that. All right. That about does it for the schedule. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Not much, but you should check the Atlanta United score.
I should. But you saying that makes me think it's going to be bad. So, I might have to preserve my mental state on that one.
All right. Well, in that case, all I got is good night, I guess.
Good night. We'll see you next week.